stop. Before you watch this, I need you to understand something. Every structure in this video was built by people who had no business building it. No machines, no engineers, no blueprint software. No way to even see what they were creating from above, and yet they built things that our best architects today look at and go quiet. Not impressed quiet, confused quiet. Because the math doesn't work, the tools didn't exist, the locations are impossible, the precision is impossible. All of it is impossible, and all of it is still standing. Right now, on this planet, waiting for you to come and explain it. Nobody has, not yet. Everything you learned about civilization was wrong. That's what archaeologists realized when they finished excavating this hillside in southeastern Turkey. Gobekli Tepe, 12,000 years old. Not a settlement, not a village, a temple. Massive T-shaped stone pillars, 6 meters tall, carved with animals, foxes, lions, vultures, in perfect detail. Each pillar weighing up to 20 tons, and here is the part that breaks everything. Humans at this time weren't supposed to be capable of this. No writing, no metal tools, no agriculture, no organized society. These were hunter-gatherers, people who moved constantly, people who had no reason to stay in one place long enough to build anything. Yet they moved 20-ton stones across this landscape, carved them with stone tools, arranged them in precise circles, and buried the entire site deliberately when they were done. For 8,000 years, it sat underground, waiting. When they found it, they had to rewrite the textbooks. Because civilization didn't begin when we thought it did. It began here, on this hillside, before anyone thought it was possible. And we still don't know how. You land on one of the most remote islands on Earth. 2,000 kilometers from the nearest landmass, in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. And then you see them. 900 stone heads, standing on the hillsides, facing inland, watching. The Moai of Easter Island. The smallest ones, 4 meters tall, the largest, 10 meters, weighing 80 tons. Carved from solid volcanic rock, in a quarry on the other side of the island. And then moved, kilometers, across rough volcanic terrain, with no wheels, with no metal tools, with no draft animals. Just rope and people, and a method we cannot fully replicate today. Every attempt to move a replica Moai using ancient methods has ended in failure or damage. The people who built these were called the Rapa Nui. They had no writing. They had no contact with any other civilization. They were completely alone, on their tiny island in the vast Pacific. And somehow they did this. They carved the hardest stone. They moved the impossible weight. They stood the statues upright. And then they vanished. The civilization collapsed. The statues were toppled. Most of the population died. And the Moai stood, silent, on their hillsides, staring at nothing. Waiting for someone to ask the question that still has no answer. You're in a small plain, 200 meters above the Peruvian desert. And below you, something that makes no sense. Lines, perfect straight lines, running for kilometers across the desert floor, without deviation, without curves, across mountains, across valleys, straight. And between the lines, figures. A hummingbird, 96 meters long, wings spread, a spider, a monkey with a spiral tail, a condor with a 130-meter wingspan. Drawn with perfect proportions in the Nazca Desert 2,000 years ago. By people who could not fly. That's the part that stops you. These figures are only visible from the air, from the ground. They're just shallow lines in the sand. You can walk across a giant hummingbird and have no idea. The Nazca people who made these never saw them complete. Not once. Not a single person who built them ever saw what they were building. They made them anyway. Archaeologists have their theories, ritual pathways, water maps, astronomical calendars. But here's what they all agree on. The lines are accurate to within millimeters, over distances of kilometers, using only rope and wooden stakes, drawn blind. For someone, or something, that could see from above. And whatever that was, we still don't know. Take a stone, a 125-ton stone the size of a truck, the weight of a blue whale. Now move it, uphill, 3,700 meters above sea level, across 20 kilometers of Andean terrain. Now cut it so precisely that when you place it against another 125-ton stone, you cannot slide a piece of paper between them. No mortar, no glue, no filler, just stone, pressed against stone, so perfectly that the joint disappears. When the Spanish arrived in Peru in 1532 and saw the walls of Sacsayhuaman above Cusco, they assumed it was built by the devil. Because they could not believe that people built this. The stones are irregular, not rectangular, not simple shapes. Some have 12 angles, some have more. And every angle fits with every adjacent stone perfectly. Like an impossible three-dimensional jigsaw puzzle, built from boulders. Earthquakes have hit Cusco, multiple times, hard ones. The Spanish colonial buildings in the city below collapsed, rebuilt, collapsed again. Sacsayhuaman, still standing, every stone still in place, every joint still sealed, after 600 years, after every earthquake. Because when you build perfectly and nothing moves, nothing falls. Imagine a valley, 40 square kilometers. Now fill it with temples, not 10, not 100, 2,000. 2,000 Buddhist temples and pagodas. Rising from the flat plain, in every direction, as far as you can see, Bagan, Myanmar. Built between the 9th and 13th centuries by the kings of the pagan empire. For 400 years, they built, without stopping, every king adding more temples, more pagodas, more shrines. At its peak, there were 10,000 structures in this valley. 10,000. Earthquakes destroyed some. Time took others. 2,000 remain. When you rise above the valley in a hot air balloon at sunrise, the mist sits low between the temples. The pagodas pierce through it, gold and brick and stone, rising in every direction. And the sun comes up behind the mountains and turns everything orange, every temple a different height, every spire a different shape. The mist moving between them, slowly. There is no photograph that captures this. No camera setting, no drone angle. You have to be there, in the basket, in the silence, watching a civilization's entire faith rise out of the morning fog. The kings who built this were not building for power. They genuinely believed that every temple they built would shorten their path to enlightenment. So they built more and more and more for 400 years. Until the Mongols came and the empire ended. But the temples remained. 2,000 acts of faith, still standing in a valley in Myanmar, waiting for the fog to lift every morning, as they have always done. From the air, you see it rise above the jungle canopy, 5 towers, reaching toward the sky, surrounded by a moat wide enough to sail a boat across. The largest religious monument ever built by any civilization in the history of the world. Angkor Wat, 402 acres, built in the 12th century by the Khmer Empire. Here's what that required. 300,000 workers, possibly more, working for 30 years. 8 million stones, the smallest the size of a refrigerator, each one cut and shaped and transported by elephant and raft from a quarry 40 kilometers away. And then arranged with astronomical precision. On the spring equinox, the sun rises directly above the central tower, perfectly aligned, every year, without fail. The architects who designed this had no calculators, no computers, no satellite positioning. They mapped the stars with the naked eye and encoded their observations into stone. On every wall surface, 1,700 Apsara dancer figures. No two faces identical, all carved by hand, in exquisite detail. The empire that built this collapsed 600 years ago. The jungle swallowed everything. And then in the 19th century, the explorers cut through the vines and found it still standing, still perfect, still aligned to the equinox sun. As if no time had passed at all. There is a rock rising from the jungle floor, 200 meters straight up, sheer vertical walls, every side. And on top of that rock, a palace, a full royal palace. With gardens, fountains, swimming pools, audience halls, built in the 5th century AD. When you climb Sigiriya today, 1,200 steps cut into the rock face, you stop halfway, because you're standing in front of frescoes. Paintings on the sheer vertical cliff, 21 women, painted in vivid red, yellow, green, preserved for 1,500 years on open rock. Exposed to monsoon, exposed to heat, still there, still coloured, still watching. At the summit, the palace foundations remain. The pools still hold water. The hydraulic system that fed them still technically functions. Gravity-fed, pressurized, from 1,500 years ago. King Kasapa built this. He chose the highest, most inaccessible point in the entire country, because he was afraid. He had killed his father to take the throne. He knew his brother was coming for him. So he built the most defensible palace in human history, on top of a rock, in the middle of a jungle, 200 meters above the ground. His brother came anyway. The battle happened in the valley below. Kasapa lost. The palace sat empty for 1,400 years. And the frescoes kept watch, alone on the cliff, waiting for someone brave enough to climb and look. You walk through a narrow canyon. The walls close in, 2 meters wide, 80 meters high. You walk for a kilometer, in silence, in shadow. Then the canyon opens, and you see it. A facade, 40 meters tall, carved directly into the rose-red cliff face. Columns, urns, figures, in perfect classical proportion, in perfect detail, in perfect condition. The treasury of Petra, carved by the Nabatean people. 2,000 years ago, with iron chisels and human hands. This is the entrance to a city carved entirely into rock, that once held 500,000 people, the capital of a trading empire that controlled the spice route between Arabia and Rome. 800 tombs cut into the cliff walls, temples, colonnaded streets, an amphitheatre, a monastery, so high in the mountains it requires 800 steps to reach. The Nabateans were water engineers. In a desert with almost no rainfall, they built channels. Terracotta pipes, cisterns, a system so sophisticated it supplied a city of 500,000 people with fresh water in the middle of a desert. 2,000 years ago. When you step through that canyon and the treasury appears, the gasp is involuntary. You can't stop it. You've seen the photos 100 times, and it still takes your breath away. Because some things, no photograph can prepare you for. Twice a day, the ocean moves, not slowly, not gently, at the speed of a galloping horse. The water comes in from 3 sides at once, faster than you can run, covering the sand, covering the road, covering everything. And the island rises, alone, from the sea. Mont Saint-Michel, a medieval abbey, built on a granite rock, in the middle of a tidal bay on the coast of Normandy, France. When the tide is out, you can walk to it, across the sand, across the mud, on foot. When the tide comes in, it becomes an island, completely surrounded, cut off from the world, in under an hour. This happens twice, every single day, without fail, for 1,000 years. Construction began in 708 AD, on the order of the Bishop of Avranches. Workers carried stone blocks across the tidal flats, racing the water. Some didn't make it. The abbey grew upward, because there was nowhere else to go. The rock is only 92 meters wide, so they built up and up and up. At the very top, a golden statue of the Archangel Michael, standing on 1 foot, sword raised, 156 meters above sea level. The tides protected it, every day, as they always had. When you stand on the ramparts at night, the sea is black. The lights of the abbey reflect in the water below. The causeway is gone, swallowed. You're on an island in the middle of the dark ocean, in the middle of medieval France. In the middle of something that has no right to exist, but does, every day. Stand on the wall, any section, look left. It disappears over a mountain ridge, look right. It disappears over another. In both directions, as far as you can see, the wall continues. And then continues further, beyond sight, beyond comprehension, 21,196 kilometers. That is the Great Wall of China. Not one wall, thousands of sections, built and rebuilt over 2,000 years by dozens of dynasties. The earlier sections, built in the 7th century BC, with rammed earth and human bone. The Ming Dynasty sections. The ones you photograph, finished in 1644, built from granite and brick, on mountain ridges so steep workers couldn't stand upright. Over 1 million people died building this. Some were buried inside it. The wall contains them, still. It crosses 15 provinces, 17 mountain ranges, countless rivers, deserts, jungles, coastal cliffs. it never stops. At its highest points, the wall sits above 5,000 meters altitude, above the tree line, above where you can breathe without effort. And someone carried bricks up there, by hand, in winter, for decades. The wall failed. Genghis Khan went around it. The Manchu went through a gate that was open from inside. It never stopped a single major invasion, but it is the largest construction project in human history. More labor, more material, more years, more deaths than anything else ever built by anyone, anywhere. When you stand on it at dawn and the mist fills the valleys below, and the wall rolls over the mountains in both directions, you stop. You can't speak. You can't think. You just stand there, understanding for the first time what humans are capable of when they decide something must exist and they are willing to pay any price to make it real. Ten structures, built by people who should not have been able to build them. In places no one should have chosen to build, using methods no one has been able to fully replicate. And here's the thing that keeps me awake at night. These are just the ones we've found. How many are still out there? Buried, underwater, hidden in jungles no drone has ever flown over. We've mapped less than 20% of the ocean floor. We've surveyed less than half the Amazon. Entire mountain ranges in Central Asia have never been properly explored. What's waiting in those places? What did humans build that we haven't discovered yet? The answer is out there, and when we find it, you'll hear about it here first. Subscribe, because we're not close to done.
Close your eyes. You're on a train. The tracks disappear ahead, not because the line ends, because the bridge beneath you is 100 meters above a canyon floor. Held up by wooden beams that were old before your parents were born. The car sways, the bolts creak. You look down through the gaps in the floor. You see nothing but air. Or you're on a different train. The platform is a market. Vendors selling fish, umbrellas 4 inches from your window. And the train doesn't slow down. Or this train, built on the bones of 100,000 men who died building it. And still running every single day. 10 railways. 10 reasons you'll never look at a train the same way again. Some are beautiful, all of them are dangerous. One of them is a war crime you can still ride. Stay with us. This is going somewhere you won't forget. This one doesn't look dangerous. That's exactly the problem. Maeklong Railway runs through the heart of a seafood market in Samut Songkhram, Thailand. not alongside it, through it. The tracks are the market floor. Vendors set up their stalls on both sides of the rails. Vegetables, fish, meat, live crabs. Sunshades hanging 4 centimeters from the passing train. 8 times a day, the train comes. No dramatic warning, no flashing lights, just a horn. And then everyone moves. Vendors pull back their awnings in seconds, by hand. Because they've done it 1,000 times. The train rolls through at full speed, centimeters from their faces. The market closes around it like a fist, then opens again like nothing happened. The market has operated this way since 1905. Over 100 years, zero change. What makes it dangerous is not that it hasn't gone wrong. It's that every time, it's one distracted vendor away from catastrophe. One new stall holder who didn't hear the horn. One tourist who stepped the wrong way. The train doesn't brake for the market. The market brakes for the train. And it always has. "27 years. That's how long it took to build this railway. The train to the clouds leaves Salta, Argentina. It climbs into the Andes, past 4,000 meters, past 4,200 meters, into a sky that looks solid from the ground. 29 bridges, 21 tunnels, 13 viaducts, 2 spirals, 2 zigzags. And then La Polvoria Viaduct. A curved steel arch, 224 meters long, 70 meters above the desert canyon below. At an altitude of 4,220 meters. The train slows here, to a crawl. And passengers lean out of windows above a drop that has no visible bottom. The canyon floor is below the clouds. At 4,200 meters, your body is already wrong. The air has 40% less oxygen. Your heart races to compensate. Your head pounds. Your judgment blurs. And you're on a narrow gauge train, crossing a steel arch over a canyon inside a cloud. The railway took 27 years to complete. Construction began in 1921. It opened in 1948. No one who started it saw it finished. And yet, people ride it for fun, because the view from the top is unlike anything else on Earth. As long as your altitude sickness doesn't take you first. "196 bridges, 55 tunnels, from Switzerland to Italy. Through the highest non-rack railway crossing in the Alps. The Bernina Express is UNESCO World Heritage. It's been called the most beautiful train journey in Europe. It's also one of the most dangerous. The difference between beautiful and lethal is a fraction of a degree. The Bernina Pass sits at 2,253 meters. The descent into Italy, a 7% gradient. On snow-covered tracks, in temperatures that reach -20, on bridges that span gorges with nothing below but alpine emptiness. The famous Brusio circular viaduct. The train curves 360 degrees on itself. On an open stone arch in a valley. Passengers on one side of the train look directly down at passengers on the other side. And below both of them, the valley floor, far below. Heavy snow can derail a train here. A single blocked track causes avalanche risk. Wind gusts at altitude can push the cars sideways, and in winter, the train still runs. Because this is Switzerland, the trains run, even when the mountain says otherwise. They call it the toy train because it looks like one. The engine is tiny. The carriages are small. The gauge just 2 feet wide. But it runs through the Himalayas. At 2,200 meters. Through sharp curves that challenge physics, through loop tunnels that feel impossible, through the middle of city streets, past shops, dogs, motorbikes, people stepping aside at the last second, every day. The Darjeeling Himalayan Railway has been running since 1881. It was built by the British to reach the tea gardens. 145 years of operation, 140 years of near misses. The steepest section climbs 900 meters in less than 12 kilometers. That's not a train climb. That's an elevator disguised as a train. The Batasia Loop. The railway spirals on itself to gain elevation. The train goes forward, then curves back under itself, then forward again, and somehow arrives higher than when it started. UNESCO listed it in 1999 as a World Heritage Site, one of only a handful of mountain railways on Earth that earned that designation. It still runs on the same tracks, the same curves, the same physics-defying climbs, with the same tiny engine that the Victorians said couldn't be done and couldn't be stopped. They named it the Devil's Nose. Not for drama, for accuracy. Near the town of Alausi in Ecuador, a mountain drops almost vertically. 2,300 feet straight down. No slope, no gradual decline. A wall. Engineers in 1902 stared at this wall and were told, "Get the train through it." Connect the Ecuadorian coast to the capital. Don't ask how. What they built is one of the most audacious pieces of railway engineering ever attempted. A zigzag. The train descends 500 meters in less than 12 kilometers by going forward to a dead end. Stopping, switching to reverse, backing down. Then switching forward again. Each pass drops the train further down the cliff. Like a controlled fall in slow motion. During construction, the workers called it the Condor's Eyrie. Then they renamed it, because 2,500 of them died building it. Malaria, rock slides, falls, yellow fever, snake bites, and the mountain itself, which did not want to be crossed. The gradient at its steepest is almost 6%. For a train, on a curve, on an exposed cliff face. It looks vertical from a distance. Up close, it feels like it. 1898. Gold, the Klondike. And a problem. The mountains between Skagway and the Yukon were nearly impassable. Thousands of gold rush prospectors died trying to cross on foot. Frozen, starving, lost. So someone decided, let's build a train through it instead. What they built climbs 900 meters in 32 kilometers. That's almost vertical. For a train. On a track 3 feet wide, hanging over cliffs, above gorges with no visible floor. The steepest section, 3.9% gradient. Through curves so tight the train must slow almost to a stop. On a ledge wide enough for the tracks and nothing else. The workers called it the White Pass. The prospectors who died crossing on foot called it the Dead Horse Trail. Because 3,000 pack horses died on this route before the railway was built. Their bones were still visible from the train when it first ran in 1900. The railway was built in 26 months. During Alaskan winters, on ice, over frozen ground. With workers dangling from ropes to drill blasting holes into cliff faces before dynamite existed for this purpose. Some sections of track hang directly above glaciers. When a glacier moves, the track moves with it. Engineers check alignment every season because the mountain here is never finished moving. You are on a train, traveling over the Indian Ocean. Nothing on either side, just water. As far as you can see. The Pamban Bridge connects mainland India to Rameswaram Island. (2,065 meters long, 143 piers, built in 1914. Over open sea, it sits in a cyclone corridor. One of the most wind-battered stretches of ocean in Asia. Wind speeds here regularly exceed 80 kilometers per hour. Cyclones come without full warning. In 1964, a cyclone hit while a train was crossing. The Dhanushkodi Express. All 115 passengers died. The sea took the train and kept it. The bridge has a lift span, a section that raises to let ships pass. When it raises, the train stops on the bridge over the sea and waits. The water here is not calm. The Arabian Sea and the Bay of Bengal meet near this bridge. Two oceans colliding, creating currents and swells and waves that hit the piers every day. A new bridge opened in 2025. modern, engineered for modern stresses. The old one stood for 111 years in open sea, through cyclones, through wars, through everything. One bridge fell, and 115 people fell with it. The second one doesn't plan to. Beautiful. That's the word everyone uses. And it's true. The Kuranda Scenic Railway is one of the most photogenic train journeys on Earth. Rainforest canopy overhead, waterfalls beside the tracks, the coral sea visible in the distance. What they forget to mention is that the train is on a cliff. The whole time. The railway runs 37 kilometers from Cairns to Kuranda through the Barren Gorge National Park. Through UNESCO World Heritage Rainforest, over 15 tunnels, across 55 bridges. Along cliff edges where the gorge drops hundreds of meters through dense jungle. The Stony Creek Falls section, the train passes within meters of a waterfall crashing onto the tracks. In the wet season, that waterfall becomes a flood. The tracks become wet. The cliff becomes unstable. Landslides happen here. The soil is soaked. The slope is steep. The weight of the jungle above and the weight of the train below, one heavy rain is enough. The railway was built in 1891. By hand, blasted and carved into Queensland's most inaccessible terrain. Workers lived in the rainforest for years, in tents, building a track that defied every logical obstacle. Today, tourists call it charming. The mountain remembers it differently. "100 years old, wood and iron, 68 meters above a gorge in Myanmar. And it still carries trains. The Gokteik Viaduct was built by the British in 1900. At the time, the largest railway trestle in the world. 689 meters long, a lattice of metal columns rising from a gorge that has no visible bottom from the tracks above. The structure was designed to last decades. It has lasted a century. No major reconstruction, no full replacement. Just maintenance on a wooden and iron frame that shivers when the train passes. Passengers describe the experience the same way. Every time, the train slows to almost nothing. A walking pace? The driver knows better than to push it. The whole structure vibrates. Metal groans. The gorge below drops into jungle mist. You can't see the bottom. You can only see the distance between you and where the jungle closes again. Kipling wrote about Gokteik in 1898. Before the bridge was built, he called the gorge a wall of forest 1,000 feet deep. The wall is still there. And twice a day, a train crawls across the thing the British built to span it. As slowly as possible, as carefully as possible. Hoping, as it has for 125 years, that today is not the day the century-old structure finally decides it's done. There are dangerous railways. And then there is this. The Death Railway was built in 1943. 415 kilometers. Thailand to Burma for the Japanese Imperial Army. To move troops and supplies through the jungle. The construction took 16 months. The worst section, Hellfire Pass. A cutting through solid rock, 300 meters long, 25 meters deep. Cut by hand, at night, by torchlight. While guards stood above. The pass got its name because the flames of the torches reflected on the rock walls made the workers look like they were cutting through hell. They were. The railway was closed in 1947, but part of it reopened in 1957. Twice a day, tourists board the train in Kanchanaburi. They cross the bridge on the River Kwai. They pass the war cemeteries, where 6,982 Allied graves lie in perfect rows. Under perfect grass, in a jungle that tried to swallow everything. They cross the Whampoa Viaduct, where the wooden structure hangs above the river. Supported by the same design the prisoners built in 1943. This is not just a dangerous railway. It is a railway made of sacrifice. Every meter of it, every cross tie, every bolt. Paid for with a human life. And it still runs. Ten railways, 10 completely different ways a track can try to kill you, A market that doesn't blink. A train in the clouds above 4,000 meters. Wooden bridges a century past their warranty. A zigzag down the face of the devil. A track built over open ocean. And one railway built on the bodies of 100,000 people who had no choice but to build it. Every one of these trains still runs. Some for tourists, some for survival, some because no one ever found a reason to stop. But here's the thing. Every one of these railways was built because someone needed to get somewhere, and the terrain said, you can't. And humans went anyway. Every time. That's not stupidity. That's the oldest thing about it. If this journey moved something in you, subscribe. We're not done yet. Not by a long way.